So as you're building your new 2020 plan, think about these two principles. If you came into 2020 already with a plan, as I've been saying for the past 6 weeks, that plan is extremely dangerous. Whatever plan you had before March 15th or March 1st, the only thing that plan can do is kill you. This is akin to, if you go to the beach, you're going to pack the beach towels and the sunscreen and an umbrella. And now you've gotten to the beach and there's a hurricane that's making landfall. And if you're still putting sunscreen lotion on your wife or husband, when that hurricane is creeping up the beach on you, there's a high probability that you're going to die. And that's the plan you had, that you were going to go to the beach and lay in the sun, is no longer any good. We need to throw that plan out. Send it to the Smithsonian. They'll frame it up for you, and you can remember it, what 2020 used to look like. You've got to prepare that right now. We need a new plan. 2020 is not going to look like what we thought in February or March, just a few months ago. And there's going to be 2 reports that I want to give you that I hope will help you as you're creating this 2020 plan. We were one of the few marketing consulting dental specific firms that lived through the 2008 recession. And we just put together a new white paper last week, Lessons from the 2008 Recession. We're going to give you that tonight. We're also going to give you a report, The Myth of Pent-Up Demand. And I want to suggest to you that the myth of pent-up demand may be unlikely to happen. Pent-up demand did not happen in the Great Recession. It didn't happen in the swine flu epidemic. It didn't even happen back, if you want to look at like the HIV scare of the 90s. What's interesting is that at first, most practices will have no idea about this, because there's really 2 things that are going to happen when practices reopen. And again, I don't know which one it's going to be. It may be completely dead. I think that's one potential outcome. The other potential outcome that I see is that there's going to be an initial demand, and it may last for 2 to 3 weeks, all the way up to maybe 1 to 2 months at most. And that's going to be all the patients that have money, still have jobs. Maybe they have an emergency, or they just really are strong on their preventative health. And that is going to create a demand surge on dental practices, that pent up demand, if you want to call it that. These practices are going to think they're busier than ever, and thinking that everything is back to business as usual, or maybe even better. And, I foresee there may even be dentists that are bragging about how fast they recovered from this epidemic. And then 1 or 2 months is going to elapse. And after that period, everything's going to come to a screeching halt. The hygiene schedule is going to dramatically lighten up. And the really true issues that are affecting the practice are going to shine out. So I'm not anti pent-up demand. I simply don't see doing the same things yesterday that are going to create the same results that you got yesterday. This COVID-19 is going to change the world the same way that 9/11 changed the world. You're never going to be able to stroll through TSA and walk on an airplane with a pocket knife in your pocket anymore, or who knows what you used to be able to do. And this little stinking virus is going to do the same thing. I'll quote Dr. Ron, who, my dad, for many of you that know, Dr. Ron has graced us with his presence tonight. I'm happy to have him on here. He's already been sending me some chats here. It looks like this is the first webinar that he's joined me on here. He's been watching the replays since over the past 6 weeks. But this is what Dr. Ron said. He said this 4 weeks ago. When we reopen, hygiene is going to get hammered. It always does. It always takes the biggest hit. Every catastrophe, the first thing to go and the last thing to come back is hygiene. So the question I'll ask to you is, and this is a question to look in the mirror and ask yourself, if you're getting a lot of your restorative out of hygiene, where's it going to come from now? What's your strategy to go direct to market to get the restorative you need to fill up your schedule and fill up your bank account. If you if hygiene is its own profit center for you, some practices hygiene is productive, other practices it's more of a non-profit center. If hygiene is a big profit center for you, what are you going to do to replace that? How are you going to offset whatever scenario comes at you? Because again, I think the coronavirus is going to cause a 12 to 24 month blip. Hygiene is going to take a massive haircut in the interim. And there's very likely, and you're seeing Fords and you're seeing all kinds of really smart people start talking about this, that there's likely to be an on again, off again scenario where they open the country up and then they lock it down. And then they open up one area and they open up another. And then there's a hot spot and they lock it down. And this thing is likely to play whack-a-mole for, I think, 2 years. And the reality is the states and governments have already opened the door. They've broken the glass ceiling to using stay-at-home protective orders. I mean, imagine if these stay-at-home protective orders had been used when we had that measles outbreak a year or two ago. We would have seen it then. But now that this actions have been taken, you can fully expect to see it used again in the very near future. So if this does happen, what's your strategy? How are you going to toggle your practice on and off so that in the busy, when you can be open, you can maximize it? When you got to close, you got to be able to flip the switch. You got to be able to really pull things back, conserve cash, take care of your people, communicate with your patients, and then be ready to rock and roll again if things were to open up in, say, 4 weeks. From the 2008 recession, we found a couple critical data points. Those practices that were able to pivot very quickly slingshotted out of the 08 recession significantly faster. Those that did not change any of their actions, they hunkered down, turned off critical systems, laid people off, and just went into a survival mode, had 38% lower revenue for 6 months longer. I mean, this is the time to start working on the strategy. You've got a couple weeks, maybe 4 weeks left before your area opens back up. Let's say 6 weeks tops. This thing is going to open back up. Like it or not, I don't make the decisions. Don't argue with me about it. Don't shoot the messenger. This is how I see the world right now. And you've got to have the strategy for your people, your practice, your patients, to ensure that you've got continuity to do whatever you need to do when this thing opens. I think for everybody in here tonight, the single greatest risk you face right now is not the quarantine, but rather, what's your dental practice going to look like once you reopen? And the huge issue that every practice expects is that they're going to be competitive and they're going to prosper. Yet, very few are preparing for how they're going to accomplish that. As Bob Knight said, most people have the will to win. Few have the will to prepare to win. And that's what we're doing right now. I'm ecstatic to see hundreds of people watching my webinar again this week. But if that's all you do is watch this webinar, you're wasting your time. You're not going to prepare to win just by watching a 2-hour webinar and then strolling into your office in a few weeks. You've got to have specific and well thought out plans. I talked a few of these questions earlier. How are you handling these reappointments? What's your strategy for ensuring you get attendance in this post-COVID world? How are you prioritizing unaccepted treatment, knowing that you can make up your 2020 profit gap by producing 15 to 20% more for 4 to 6 months? I'll say that again. If you have worked out a budget, and we've helped many of our doctors do this, if you can produce 15 to 20% for 4 to 6 months following your reopen, you can make up the profit that you lost from the shutdown. The math is there. We've done it for several. If hygiene is your largest source of elective treatment, what's your go-to-market strategy? What's your plan to continue dominating your market area? Are you marketing like everybody else? The doctors and owners that take this time to prepare are going to have full schedules and full chairs and be on the balls of their feet when they come out of this. Those that don't, that just watch this webinar and do nothing, are going to have a lot of open chair and open schedule time to figure this out later. You're just trading one for the other. Let me tell you a story about that. Lee Iacocca ran Chrysler in 1979. In 1979, Chrysler was on the verge of bankruptcy. Lee Iacocca went to the Congress, went to the US government, and he said, guys, we're about to declare bankruptcy. Next week, Chrysler will declare bankruptcy. Lee said, I need $1 billion in 1979. I need $1 billion today to avoid this. And the US government said, we've never bailed anybody out. We're not going to start now. And Lee said, okay, but understand this. If you don't give me $1 billion today, you're going to sign a check tomorrow for $2 billion because I'm about to lay off 475,000 people, and you're going to write a $2 billion check for unemployment. And the rest is history. Chrysler in 1979 was the first company ever to receive a government bailout in the US. Since then, the glass ceiling is broken, and dozens, hundreds probably, of companies have been bailed out. There will be more. These stay-at-home orders will continue. Lee's story is the same situation you're faced with right now. You're writing a check for your time. You can spend the time today, or you can spend the time later. If you're still in business, you will have to spend the time to adapt to the new world order. That's probably not the right way to say that. No conspiracy theories here. The new way of the world. You're going to spend the time now, or you're going to spend twice the time later after you've already learned the lesson. I think it was Maxwell that said, there's no mistakes, there's only lessons. And lessons will be repeated until they're learned. And once they're learned, you know that the lesson is learned because the behavior changes. So we can learn the lesson now. We can write a check for $1 billion now, or we can write a check for $2 billion tomorrow. Downsize this for your story, right? You can write a check for your time to figure this thing out now, or you can spend your time in 2, 3, 4, 6 months after you've already taken a bloodbath for a few months, losing more production. I would suggest that the former might be the better strategy. Not streamlining and creating efficient systems during these recessions, we saw this in the last recession too, is going to lead to a more significant decline that could take even 5 to 8 years to recover. We saw practices out of the 08 recession that didn't get back to their previous numbers until 2014 or 2015. That was not normal, but we did see that in some practices. That comes from a number of things: loss of new patients, new regulations. There's going to be new financial challenges coming out of this COVID crisis. I am predicting that dental insurers are going to drop reimbursements further to recoup some of their lost profits. I think it's very, 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 very unlikely that there is a PPE reimbursement line. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first in line to say Colin was wrong on that. I think that's extremely unlikely. And I think it's most likely that they run the opposite direction and they actually clamp down on reimbursements more. So if you're very insurance dependent, how are you going to negotiate this when you have unemployment rates going up, which means you have less patients that even have insurance to spend? What are you going to do to shore up your collections if unemployment's up and reimbursement rates for the patients that do have insurance is down? How are you going to pivot? Where are you going to go find new patients, and what are they going to do?